Good evening, everyone. The first article for the day is about RTI. What is RTI? Why is this under discussion? What is the significance of this current context? The usual problems. This is the scope of the discussion today. Now, information is actually important in a democracy. Can you tell me why? The quality of democracy depends on the quality of information and the real-time updates that citizens have, based on which they will take decisions on the performance of the government. So, the quality of democracy depends on participation of the population, and the participation as such will again depend on the quality of information, and therefore information is the invisible grease that will exactly help in improving the quality outcomes of democracy. This is the basis, and almost 20 years ago we have had the right to information as a landmark legislation that was supposed to improve the outcomes of democratic governance. This is the context. But today, in the digital era, there is one act which is supposed to protect this data. Data Protection Act, simply put. And the underlying logic of that Data Protection Act is privacy. We've had the 2017 Puttaswamy judgment where the Supreme Court declared that privacy is a fundamental right. Because if you don't respect it as a fundamental right, there is every chance that the state can become very powerful, and that power itself can consume the so-called social contract. We don't want a surveillance state. So, in governance, at this point of time, there is a clash between information versus privacy. This is the core conflict now. Why is it a conflict? Let me help you understand this through the provisions that are there in the law. You have Section 8 of RTI Act. There are some subclauses which you can go through. This Section 8 says that the government cannot disclose some information if it is personal. Now, with this Data Protection Act, what is considered to be personal is a big question mark. Let's say if there is a public official, that public official's expenditure is exempted. Is it not fair for the citizens of this country to ask how much money is this government official spending? It's fair enough, right? Similarly, any information regarding the recruitment procedure, that is also considered personal. This is a breach of the democratic values, and that's a big problem. Okay? So this is the central debate about this article. So what is the author saying? Here you will see some important information. Okay? Bewar in central Rajasthan. Yesterday or day before yesterday, I was discussing about in one of the classes about Jan Suchna portal of Rajasthan. There is Section 4 of RTI. As per that Section 4 of RTI, the governments are supposed to proactively display as much information as possible without the citizens asking for it. Why is it the case? Because information as such is the fundamental basis of governance. And In Rajasthan, the historic in Rajasthan there is a historic movement for RTI where the people came together and demanded that we want a transparent mechanism where a clear cut accountable mechanism where we want to know how our money is spent, and that is Bewar, which is famously dubbed as RTI City. There you will find one museum also, RTI Museum. So there is a lot of symbolism in this article. How we are trying to showcase Bewar as a model city for RTI, and now by saying that every personal information can be withheld, it is against the very ethos and is symbolic of what we can lose. See, RTI is not something that is given to us just like that. There was a lot of struggle behind the legislation. So this Bewar as a city, when it is used in an essay like this, will showcase it is a symbolic representative of what we can lose. So here, what are we discussing? We are not discussing content alone. I am talking about a literary expression. When you use and bring the historic struggle into the context and want to highlight the danger, this is one way of using literary expression in essay. Symbolism is a very powerful form of expression in essay. So by pitching the symbolic images in the context of a threat that can be posed to this legislation, what are you essentially trying to do? You are showcasing what you can lose. In the middle section, you have, the various provisions of the law which can act as a hindrance to RTI. Even previously in 2012, there is a judgment from Supreme Court called the Satish Deshpande judgment. In that judgment, Supreme Court said that we can withhold information if it is personal. Citing that as a cause, a lot of cases has cited that as a cause and withheld that information. So there needs to be a clear-cut guidelines on what is personal, what is not personal. And in the absence of such clear-cut guidelines, and now with this kind of information, governance can become very opaque, which is dangerous for the survival of democratic ethos in institutions. So this is the criticism. Okay. So what will be the fix? Correcting this arbitrariness and establishing clear-cut guidelines where this is applicable, where this is not applicable, and not leaving anything to subjective interpretation of the institutions. That is how you can make this law clearer. That is the takeaway. Okay. Now, see, this place in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh, is also relevant in the context of climate change talks. But now the context is different. The other day we were discussing about how Donald Trump wanted to bring about a peace resolution between Palestine and Israel. So at this event in Sharm el-Sheikh, this person along with other stakeholders, they wanted to bring about a peace or truce. Like they wanted to create a ceasefire agreement and establish a long-term solution. Trump came up with a 20-point agenda, and the first one, which is probably the easiest one of all of them, is exchange of prisoners. That was facilitated yesterday, and that was hailed as a very important event. But the real challenge still remains. Who is going to disarm both the sides? Is Palestine actually given a say in this entire peace process? What will be the status quo after both the sides agree to disarm themselves? First of all, it is not clear if they will disarm themselves. If yes, how? What is the role of UN in this whole picture? It is not clear. Is there a binding agreement? It is not clear. Is there a process that will lead to a binding agreement? It is not clear. So, many experts believe that it's a start, but unless and until there is a clarity on how we will progress further, it will remain as just a namesake event. Let's see how it will unfold, and when the news comes up, we'll discuss it further. Now, estimating India's potential growth rate. This is a important article and a fairly technical article in terms of concepts of economy. See, when you're talking about GDP growth, what is the formula? Okay, so potential GDP. This is the point of discussion in this article. Potential GDP means, okay, I'll remove all the jargon, etc., all the stats, figures, etc., everything. Let's say you are a person capable of lifting 10 kg of weight. Okay. Let's say you are lifting only 5 kgs. Are you performing to your potential? No. Let's say you are lifting 12.5 kg. You are performing way above your potential. Having said that, will it sustain? Can you continue to lift 12.5 kg? So there is this concept of time lag. Economy, like yesterday we were talking about how wealth generation requires time lag. Like that you need to give some time to that system to grow. Otherwise it will get stagnated or it will fizzle out. It can only be short-lived. What should you do to ensure that you keep lifting this 12.5 kg? You have to grow stronger. You have to eat proper diet. You have to get the right amount of rest. There are so many other factors that come into the picture to maintain this resilience and continue to grow bigger and bigger and perform above our potential. This is the logic between the gap between our potential and our existing performance. And if you are continuing to perform above, if you are supposed to continue to perform above your potential, what does it take? This is the panda. Now with the same context, let's come back and see and apply that logic to our economy. Consumption, government expenditure, net trade. All of this will have a certain limitation. Economy will have limitations, right? You cannot sustain a long, growth rate. Like say for example, at this present point of time, a potential GDP according to experts is 6.5. But the last quarter we are seeing almost 7.5%. And this is mainly led by manufacturing sector. Other sectors are not performing. In fact, they're slowing down. In order to sustain this momentum, and if we have to continue to grow, what should we do? This has been the question. One of the major concerns is that investment. The other day also we were talking about saving rate. How to tap into our domestic resources, etc. We were talking about it, right? The major concern right now is this investment. It's hardly hovering around 30 to 35% in last almost 1 decade. If you take the 20-year data, it has not ever breached 35%. This is one stat. Another stat is incremental capital output ratio. Are we using our capital in an efficient way? Let's say if I am giving a startup some money, where are they spending it? Are they working on the basics and getting the right kind of output? If yes, it is an efficient use case. If no, It is poor usage of capital. ICOR, incremental capital output ratio. What additional unit of revenue am I getting by investing in one extra unit of production? Okay, so in simply put, it is a measure of how well we use our economic resources. Should this ratio be high or should it be low? It should be as low as possible. When will it be low? What all will create efficiency? In fact, it is about productivity. What all will improve our productivity? Skills, policy certainty, technology, when you spend on R&D, and finally, global competitiveness. All this should come together. Only then we will be able to lift above our weight. Whatever is happening right now, the engine is already overheating. We are performing way above our potential. And if that momentum has to sustain, these are the areas where the government must support and pitch in. That is the central point of this entire article. However, remember that this is just an estimate based on author's estimation on historical data. Till now, this has been our potential GDP. If that premise is to be questioned, this entire analysis will probably change. But we are not questioning that premise, and we are sticking to this assertion that 6.5% is our potential GDP, and if we were to sustain that, these are the things we should be doing. That is the gist of this article. Clear? Okay, moving forward. Okay, I want to connect this to the discussion that we had the other day. See, now you are saying that we want more investment. That is also one more point. If we do this, FDI will come into the scene and we will have enough capacity, financial capacity to fuel this growth further. This is one assertion of the article writers. Now let's take the same argument and push it to the discussion that we had the other day. Why should we depend on external powers? Why not move in the direction of tapping into the domestic savings? Households are traditionally investing in land, real estate, gold. This is not something sustainable and it is not going to help Indian growth story. The reason why they don't want to invest in the corporate market or the stock market is because of the uncertainty involved. What if we can bring a certain sense of stability to that economy? SEBI should proactively act in such a direction that nobody is lured by the promise of multi-bagger stocks or 100x returns, etc. SEBI should proactively flag any such false promises and create an ecosystem where investors feel safe. This is one of the agenda of Indian financial architecture. Deepening of the corporate bond market as well as the stock markets. Retail investors should be safeguarded. That will actually amplify the Indian economic growth story. Okay, this is what we discussed the other day. Let's connect both these articles here. That is when we will punch way above our weight. This is what the article says. Clear? Okay, the need to address caste-based atrocities. See, this is a long established fact that caste is a lived reality. Even if you say this is a thing of the past, data proves otherwise. What is the data source here? What are we talking about? We are talking about the NCRB data. So, if you see what the latest reports are saying, NCRB, that is the National Crime Record Bureau report, which released last month, has seen that there is a 0.4% increase in the number of cases registered with respect to atrocities against SCs and STs. Caste-based, insults or slurs or discrimination shown towards them, 0.4%. And there is a 28.8 increase over the number of cases reported in 2022. This signifies that caste and the caste-based atrocities, even though you have the legal provisions to safeguard them, in reality the data says it is not actually translating into the intended outcomes. In fact, quite the opposite. Number of cases are increasing. Of course, they should also lead to conviction, right? If the cases are increasing, what does it indicate? It indicates the presence of bias in the society. If the cases are increasing and they're seeing a conviction, it also indicates a responsiveness. And eventually we hope to see a correction in the behavior of people. Just because the cases are increasing, it doesn't necessarily mean it is bad. What is definitely bad is when those cases don't get resolved. Okay, that is the first thing. Now, another observation is rural areas. From assaults in rural areas for defying caste norms to urban discrimination in housing, employment, caste continues to deny citizens dignity and opportunity. Now, these kind of articles are very useful in GS1, Indian society. There is a previous year question. Do you think caste is a thing of the past, or is it a continuing reality? Something on these lines. You need data to establish the fact that this is not a thing of the past. Caste as a social structure exists even now. But how do I take your word? You need some data pointer, right? This is the data pointer, NCRB. So GS1 is not just about writing examples. It is also sometimes about facts. You need evidence for your sociological assertions. And articles like this are helpful. Okay? Even the other day when there was an article on mental health, we were talking about how multidisciplinary questions can come from GS1, GS2, right? There also data can be useful. Here also data can be useful. So please use that data. And the article writer goes on to discuss various socio-religious reformers like Ambedkar, Periyar, or you can even think of Jyotiba Phule. Name any person who worked for this institution of caste to get, decimated. Even though their ideals are incorporated in the laws, in execution there is some gap. And that is why you will still see the persistence of this caste-based inequalities. Okay? So you can use all these points to explain that caste is not a thing of the past. A similar article you will find even in Indian Express written by Yogendra Yadav. That is also important. If you have sociology optional, please go back and read that editorial also. What is the problem here? See, this is identified. The absence of a robust policy framework to bridge the gap between social elites and subaltern groups. That is the problem. You have sporadic constitutional provisions, laws, etc., but there is no enforcement mechanism and time-to-time audit. And there is no policy on how to bridge that also. This is the root cause of this caste-based discrimination. And historically, we have had many situations where political intervention tried to solve this to a large extent. Here is where you will see two phenomenon: politicization of caste, casteization of politics. Two different phenomenon. One involves using politics to solve the problem of caste. The other is using caste to win political, contests. Both happen simultaneously. It is not like in one phase one is happening, in the other phase another phenomenon is happening. Both the phenomenon exist together in India. But both the phenomenon are not exactly addressing the root problem. And this is going to continue unless the state goes for a multi-pronged approach. It requires sociological, political, policy level, execution level, technological, financial empowerment. Think of all the GS syllabus pointers. All those should be clubbed together and you will have a solution. Only then you can see the bridge between what is and what ought to be getting reduced. Otherwise, this will continue even further. This is the assertion of the article. Now, this last important article is about the Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship. Here, you have to know Durand line, which is the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. You can get map-based questions on international relations. Conflict-based regions is one theme. Since this is a region in conflict, you can expect a question. Okay, what happened? This month, you are seeing some border skirmishes between Afghanistan and Pakistan. On one hand, you have Taliban. Other hand, you have Pakistan, which historically had a fairly good friendly relation. However, things are turning sour of late. Why? Pakistan historically wanted to support Taliban because Taliban was actually listening to Pakistan. Now, after the exit of US, Taliban became more or less strong enough, or the de facto power center in Afghanistan, and they no longer want to play to the tunes of Pakistan. Add to this, you also have internal fractions within Pakistan. Let's say Balochistan is there, and there are some tribes that want to go against Pakistan, and many such anti-Pakistan groups are operating from the Afghan soil. Pakistan doesn't like it, and to fix this issue, they wanted to have ties with Taliban, but it is not working out. Why is it not working out? Because Taliban is no longer dependent on Pakistan. It is establishing ties with China, Iran, many other players. And this has been a problematic area for Pakistan. What is the implication of this dynamic for India? One, indirectly it can spill over. But also it is an opportunity for India to engage and leverage this fraction. Because ultimately what is diplomacy? Negotiating with whatever is the ground reality so that it benefits our country. When you have a linkage with China, Iran kind of nations, it is bound to become slightly more powerful than what it was. Right now, Pakistan doesn't have any leverage. And this is the ground reality. Even if Pakistan gets support from US is not going to involve to a large extent because China is also invested in Pakistan. And they know they are not going to get anything out of it. It's just a bargaining chip to control India. So the only leverage that Pakistan had as a friendly neighbor, they are losing even that. Even the Saudi-Pakistan diplomatic ties is just namesake, because it is highly unlikely that Saudi will take any such action. It's just a rhetorical, uh, you know, gesture to ensure that they don't lose any strategic advantage. India is navigating the world in this kind of uncertain environment, especially in South Asia. So we have to stick to our basics. What is that basic? Strategic autonomy. And we will not involve in the foreign policy issues of any other sovereign nation unless it impacts us. No point in taking a moral high ground. That is the gist of this article, and that's it for the day. Okay, thank you. One more thing. Tomorrow you might not have a current affairs class because there is some event happening here. Uh, Most likely you won't have it. Okay, thank you. If it is otherwise, you will get some information. If there is a class, you will get information. As of now, it is not there.